Honestly speaking, photography is simply a tool for me to express a lot of ideas. I'm actually a passionate nature lover and wildlife enthusiast. So for me, photography is just a medium of expression. It's just a tool that I use to express many things related to my actual passion, which is nature and wildlife.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw. Okay, so the first one, just so I can describe it, is it's nuts. It's a photograph of a giraffe standing on a grassy kind of savanna stretch of savanna, I guess. The land that the giraffe is on is quite flat. There's just a hint of what looks like might be acacia trees off towards the horizon. The lighting hitting the giraffe is very high key, so it's like the contrast is way up. The pattern on the giraffe is really kind of stark and bold. And what really makes the photograph as well is the sky is quite like dark gray to dark blue. It's quite dark, but there's the prism of a rainbow off in the distance. And so for anybody who's listening to this, you have to go to the website or to YouTube or whatever to see this image. It's just it blows your brain up because it's just incredible. So walk us through this photograph.
Sure. So as I said, right, I'm mostly using the camera to express a lot of things. So for me, being a wildlife photographer, wildlife photography is not just documentation of what I see in nature. Also, it's a form of art for me. So I'm more of a creative nature photographer than somebody who documents, let's say, a species or a behavior or some activity and stuff like that. So it so happened that this is Masai Mara in Kenya. It's a savanna, as you said. And in the early afternoons in some months, it rains a lot. So because of the proximity to Lake Victoria, precipitation on most afternoons around 4, you can expect rain here. Mm-hmm. And which means it's actually quite a bright sunny afternoon otherwise, but then the clouds are gathering because of the precipitation. And then that's how you see this really dark cloud in the background of the giraffe and the horizon there. Mm-hmm. So behind my back was the sun. And behind, on the background of my photograph is this dark clouds. Mm-hmm. So I very well remember I was facing southwest when I saw this giraffe. To be honest, it rained very heavily that afternoon, and we were just covered completely. And it was so bad that it was raining so heavy that we couldn't actually even open our windows. So we were chit-chatting inside the car, waiting for the rain to stop. As soon as it did, I stood up to remove the hood of the car. And that's when I saw the rainbow. Mm-hmm. The moment I saw the rainbow, I told my driver guide Matt that this is basically because of experience, that when I see a great background, mm-hmm. I know I need a good foreground. So I stood up on the seats of the car and started looking around in every direction. It didn't matter in the direction of the rainbow or anywhere for that matter. And I don't exactly remember where, but I found 5 giraffes walking across at a distance. Mm-hmm. So I jumped into the car and I yelled at my driver guide and said, Matt, I would like you to drive at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And please pardon me, I don't exactly remember the direction. Mm-hmm. So in the car, when we speak of an hour or a clock, the head of the car is 12 o'clock. The tail is 6 o'clock. On the right side at 90 degrees is 3 o'clock. On the left side at 90 degrees is 9 o'clock. Because I'm sitting behind the driver, I won't be able to tell him, go there or go here because he's not even seeing you. Mm-hmm. But the moment I tell him, go to 9 o'clock quickly, mm-hmm. he knows he needs to turn the car left 90 degrees and start driving.
Right.
And this being a savanna, all I had to tell him was the direction of the giraffe. And I said, please race towards that place because the rainbow won't last forever.
For sure.
So while he started driving, I instructed, I teach photography, I conduct photography tours. I instructed a couple of participants in my Land Cruiser that we are actually heading towards a giraffe. And of course, the rainbow size wouldn't change wherever we are. Mm-hmm. So we started going towards the giraffe. And I instructed my driver guy to align the car in such a way that we were about 20 to 30 seconds before the giraffe coincides the rainbow. And most of us used a smaller lens, and we did take a cliche curved rainbow in the horizon with animals in the frame, and that was a fantastic shot. But that was not the end of the shot for me. That was the beginning. So what I did was I dropped the smaller camera down, which was a 70 to 200 millimeter, and I picked up a super telephoto lens, which was a 400 millimeter 2.8 lens. And I instructed Matt in such a way that now I started asking him to reverse the car.
Right.
Everybody in my car were a little surprised that we've come running towards the giraffe now, and you're asking him to go farther. So my idea was to minimize the size of the giraffe in my composition, so that I could fit the giraffe entirely in a super telephoto lens. Now, this is a very interesting lesson for people to learn. So what happens when you go close, you get an animal which is bigger. When you go far, the animal becomes smaller. That is everybody's, it's a very common knowledge.
Sure.
Now, what I did was I used a longer lens so that I could magnify the rainbow, but I wanted to demagnify the giraffe. So I reversed the car by around 200, 300, 400 meters. I don't know how much distance. All I knew was seeing through the viewfinder, telling him to go, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, until one point where I said, stop. Now, the distance from me and the giraffe changed by a lot of extent, which is why the giraffe became smaller. But if you think about it, the distance from the rainbow and my camera hardly changed, because it's such a huge distance.
Yeah.
And going 100 meters, 200 meters behind wouldn't make much of a difference if you think about it. So that's how I could maintain a large rainbow and minimize the size of the giraffe in my frame. And thus was this photo born by creative thinking on the spot.
No, it's okay. So I've been doing photography for decades. So I've been around images for a very long time, and obviously, and I'm drawn to wildlife and nature photography. And I can honestly say I have never seen a photograph of a giraffe like this before. It's just so eye-catching, and that's the thing about the photographs that I've seen of your work. I realize it's the, I get to see the best of the best, or whatever, your better shots, but the quality of your images is just spectacular. And so, yeah, I was just like, I need to have you on my podcast, because these are just unbelievable. And I have to point out, you're the first guest. I'm happy to say you're the first guest from India. So thank you.
Privileged.
So where are you right now?
I'm in the peninsular India, in a city called Bangalore. We call this the Silicon Valley of India.
Right.
So high-tech city, Bangalore.
So yeah, I know Bangalore as being a city of like a lot of software and different kind of developers and like high tech. So is there a reason why you're in Bangalore is it for work, or is it just happens to be that that's where you grew up? Like why? What's the connection between you and Bangalore?
Right. So I was actually born in a city about 150 kilometers from Bangalore called Mysore, which is a heritage, culturally rich city. So I actually ended up in an IT job in 2001, and I started moving to Bangalore in 2003. I worked for multinational companies like Accenture, America Online for a while before I actually gave up my IT career to take up full-time photography. So I came to Bangalore for work and for doing entrepreneurial stuff and being audacious. This is the big city. I wouldn't be able to pull off what I did in my own hometown.
Okay, but so for example, so you give photography workshops and lessons and tours. So you teach photography. So how do you live as a photographer? Like what's your who are you? What's your life? Like it's amazing to inspire people. Like here's this guy living in India, being a professional photographer. So take us through your...
Right. So, Ran, I was 25, 26 when I started winning awards and getting my pictures on cover pages, and I realized I was pretty good at it. I'm actually a reasonably good instructor and a teacher in anything I can teach. So it need not be photography. I can teach web design as passionately, and creatively as I do photography. So I realized very early that after I quit my job and tried to become a photographer full time without really knowing too much about the world of wildlife photography, I realized very soon that I wouldn't be able to make a living just selling photos and prints and stock and stuff like that. So, since I had a combination of two, three skills, one is excellent teaching abilities and reasonably high tech savviness, being a user experience designer, website designer, and stuff like that. And most importantly, knowing my photography well, I combined the three and I realized instead of struggling to sell my photos and being a freelance photographer, I became an entrepreneur where I came up with a company called Toehold, which doesn't need to sell photos to make a living, needs to sell how to click photos to make a living. And from going on to becoming a photography instructor, I became a photography entrepreneur where I hired more people. We started a company in the pre-COVID times. We were in three major cities in India, and we have a whole host of services related to the photography enthusiast as our customer.
Oh, wow.
For example, we do workshops, which is the smallest part of our offering. Then we have a camera rental business, which operated in three cities before COVID. Right now, it operates in Bangalore, where I live, and in a forest around Bangalore called Kabini, where we have a small rental store.
Oh, wow.
Apart from teaching and providing camera gear on hire, I operate photography tours across the globe. I have a footprint on 6 continents, from the Arctic to Antarctica to the far east of Russia to Central America, North America, Africa, a lot of places in Europe, including the Arctic and stuff like that. So it's a travel company with a photography perspective.
Wow.
And at the peak of our workforce, we were 35 people full-time employed just before COVID happened.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. So much. So good. So good. So impressive. Okay. So in my day job, what I do is I do a lot of business consulting. So I have done indirectly some work with Accenture. In Hong Kong, I have a management consulting or business consulting company myself, much smaller scale in terms of staff than what you
Right.
described. But what I did for a very long time was focus on articulating entrepreneurship. Like, what is the essence of entrepreneurship? How do we get to that? And eventually landed in this area called service network leadership. So spent the past 15 years looking at leadership and service.
Right.
And so I am fascinated. No, I'm not. I am impressed and amazed and really drawn by your photograph. As I'm talking, I have this incredible photo of this lone giraffe walking on this very beautiful green savanna with behind it this out of focus, unbelievable rainbow. So your image really is just explodes off my monitor. But when I hear you talk about your development and where you are now as an entrepreneur, I have all of these other questions, all of these other sort of reactions to that. So when COVID suddenly came up in Bangalore, how did you guys react? Like at first, like what were the thoughts and the feelings, and how did it even kind of break into your consciousness?
Right. So I remember 10th of March or 8th of March 2020, I was on my way back from the Himalayas. I was leading a snow leopard expedition.
You
And
sound like you have the worst life.
those 15 days were really tough.
That is amazing. Okay, but go ahead, please.
Yeah. So when I came back to civilization, because we don't have network in the mountains, and when I came back to civilization, I started hearing about Wuhan, I started hearing about COVID, I started hearing about the virus and all of that. But I honestly didn't realize, we have been through swine flus, we have been through Ebolas, we have been through all of these in the past. So no way we could have imagined what was going to come in the months to, come across. So we basically, all I was worried about back then when I was, driving 2 days from the mountains to the nearest airport was to ensure my American guest would be able to fly back home, because we were hearing about airports getting blocked a lot of queues and stuff like that. So fortunately, he went back, and we all got back home. Around 15th of March, I remember we started seeing issues, and we started getting into some kind of a confinement. And India had the first lockdown on the 23rd of March, or 22nd of March. I vaguely remember, Sunday. That's when I realized that this is something else. This is not just a typical, outbreak of some disease or something like that. It's epic.
Sure.
And I didn't waste too much time. Being a tech savvy person, I already remember 27th March was my first webinar. So I already was pretty good on social media and had a lot of activities going on. So I remember the last week of March was a lot of fun Instagram lives and Facebook lives, and inspirational messages and stuff like that. But I suddenly realized, hey, this is not going to stop in a week or two. This may go on for a month or two. And I had to start thinking about the next month's expenses and revenue and all of that. So I didn't waste too much time. I used to do classroom workshops for 20, 25 people because we have a classroom infrastructure. But that's when Zoom came into prominence, and I started taking virtual classes and webinars. And the whole month of April, I taught some 125 people online. And then I started doing weekly webinars on different topics on photography. And so I think we quickly adapted from being on the field to in the classroom to a virtual photography instructional service. And that's when we started thinking, how do we survive the non-travel situation?
Amazing.
And thankfully, in India, anything you do, you get a lot of volumes. So I was blessed with reasonably a good number of photography enthusiasts who were also locked up and wanted to learn something, and they
Sure.
all came to my class.
Okay. Wow. Well, you know what? I think what we'll do is we'll use that as a kind of natural pause to go on to the next photograph, because each one needs to get its time in the spotlight, because your photographs are just absolutely fantastic. So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.